In this section, we extend our discussion to the various methods and ways of return calculation on financial instruments and how do we quote those returns as we go along. So primarily this discussion is going to lie around what kind of return nomenclatures we had zeroed down in the previous segment. We're going to look at various returns and measures of returns, right? So the calculations would border around something called as total return, something called as annualized return, then the real versus nominal return, and tax computed return. Four of these separate segments we're going to look at. Let's start with the first one, which is a concept around what is the total return on any instrument, right? Now, let's say we are trying to calculate two different return calculations for two different stocks. Mr. X purchased shares of two companies and received dividends and sold the shares post specified years. Calculate the overall return. So in the first case, you purchased it at 100, then you received 10 and you received 90, right? So this is the outflow, this is the inflow, and this is the inflow. In almost all total return calculations, what you are effectively calculating is, on an overall basis, inflow minus outflow divided by outflow. That's your total return, right? In the case of stocks, you write it as final price, right, plus dividend minus initial price divided by initial price. In other words, if the first example is to be taken, 90 plus 10 minus 100 divided by 100. We bought it at 100. 90 is the final price. So inflow is 90 plus 10, which is 100. So that's going to give me 0% return. That's my 0% return. In the second case, we made final price was 250, dividend was 30 minus 200 divided by 200. So that's 80 by 200. That's 40% return for us in the second case. But remember, this is the overall return. This is the total return that we have calculated. This is the absolute return that you have calculated. It appears like 40% is good, but also note that 40% is over 3 years, right? So now you will extend this calculation into what is typically known as annual return. So you want to find out that what was the equivalent annualized return you would have made in order to get to 40, right? So effectively that annualized return calculation has to come in. In simple terms, what we are assuming that all this is received towards the end, right? And based on that calculation, we're going to try and arrive at what is called as the annualized return. That's an assumption that the dividend is received on the sale value or the holding period. At the end of the third year, you receive 30 rupees, right? So what is your annualized return in this case? If you note, this is going to be very similar to the concept of CAGR we have discussed elsewhere, right? Compound annual growth rate. You start with the initial value, which is 200, and 200 should have grown at a certain rate for the period n years, and that should have given you 30 plus 250, which is 280, correct? If you solve for the rate of return R, that's your annualized return that you're calculating, right? So effectively, what it would work out to be would be 1 plus R to the power n, in this case n being 3, is equal to 280 by 200. You take the nth root or the third root, that implies 1 plus R is equals to 200 by 280 raised to the power 1 by 3. Take 1 on the other side, that implies R is equals to, sorry, this is 280 by 200. I made a mistake in the denominator and numerator. Raised to the power 1 by 3 minus 1. That's the equation you arrive at. That's the same equation that arrives at for the CAGR as well, correct? Final value divided by initial value raised to the power 1 by number of years minus 1 is what was our CAGR calculation as well. That is the annualized return. In other words, if you had invested 200 rupees for 3 years at 11.86%, that would have given you 280, which is what we got from the second investment as such, right? So annualized return is a way of saying that that the returns are going to come. What is the annual expected return that gives you the same value at the end of the years, right? Now there is a trick here. In this particular case, we assumed that this 30 and this 250 both were happening at the end of the tenure. That's not necessarily true. What happens if 30 happens in between somewhere, right? So that's where we are going to come to the concept of IRR once again. Again, something that we have discussed elsewhere, that if you have multiple cash flows, effectively what equates your inflow to the outflow, what makes your present value as zero, right? Remember, we are doing some investment and then you're getting some cash flows out of it, correct? So if the investment is negative and cash flows are positive and you're getting it at various points of time, let's say annually, and you discount those, let's say that 30 rupee dividend came in terms of two dividends of 20 and 10 over 2 years, and then you got in the third year you got 250 rupees and you had put in an investment of 200. The rate R that solves this and makes this equal to zero is your IRR, and that's also effectively your return because you can take the investment on the other side. The investment has grown into these cash flows, right? What you paid for the investment is nothing but the present value of all these cash flows. So that's what IRR gives you. Right now, when you're doing IRR, you also note this another term available here. We'll come to that in a moment. Let's actually look at as an example of IRR. In real life, investments actually work over a period of time. You might have invested something in year one, that's investment one. Then in year two, there is investment two. Then year three, you might actually have redeemed something. You might have gotten a cash flow. Then in year four, you might have gotten a cash flow. Year five, you might have gotten a cash flow. Your calculation is actually going to be on this, right? Let's say assume in year one you invest 1 lakh rupees. That's an outflow, remember. In year two you invest 10,000 rupees. In year three you actually get 1 lakh rupees. You take it out of your investment. Year four you get 30,000 rupees from your investment. What is the return that we have, right? This is effectively going to create a cash flow. And that cash flow is going to look like minus 1 lakh minus 10,000 in year 1, 2, year 3 would be plus 1 lakh and year 4 would be plus 30,000. And you can then calculate 1 plus r square, 1 plus r cube and 1 plus r to the power 4. You could do that and you solve for r. That's effectively what IRR gives you. So the formula of IRR will give you this return calculation that has come in. Let's try and do this on an Excel file. So let's look at this. Let's increase the size. That's the first case we are looking at, which is, let's say on 1st of January 2009, you invested 1 lakh rupees. Remember, this is an outflow. This is an outflow, and that's how Excel knows that what is an outflow and what is an inflow. And in any return calculation, you need to have at least one inflow and at least one outflow. You can't have all outflows or all inflows, then you can't calculate the return, right? So now all you need to do is put the rate formula for IRR and just select all these and 8%. That's your return. That's your return on IRR, right? Now the problem with this, so that's effectively the return that we have calculated, but the problem with this is if you actually extend this a little bit and for a second we assume that the dates are not at regular intervals. Note these are regular intervals. These are happening on regular intervals. Every year there is an outflow. So the IRR formula actually never took the input as when the inflow happened. It assumed that all the cash flows happened at a regular interval, and by default IRR assumes annual intervals, right? Now let's say the same investments actually happen on different dates. 1st January 2009, 22nd May 2010, 12th June 2011 and 1st February 2012. Correct? If I use IRR here, the problem with IRR is it gives me the same number. And that's obvious because it did not really differentiate between the first case and the second case. It should have, but it did not. In the first case, it assumed that all these were annual inflows and outflows. In the second case also, it assumed the same. And that's where IRR basically fails. IRR will fail in investment return calculation if the cash flows are irregular. If the cash flows are irregular, IRR will fail to solve the problem, which is where you will use something called as extended IRR as the formula. This is going to be the formula that you're going to use day in, day out, whenever you are working in the wealth management industry, purely because investments happen at different dates. There could be multiple signs. So note the arguments. It takes values, and corresponding to those values, it takes dates, right? It takes another argument called guess, but you can leave that blank. And when you put OK, it calculates if 1 lakh was invested. So what is it trying to do? It's saying that 1 lakh rupees was invested and then 10,000 more was invested on 22nd May, right? If I go back to the earlier discussion, what's happened is on this date, 1st Jan 2009, we have basically invested 1 lakh rupees. Now this is invested till this date, 12th June 2011, it is invested till then. Another 10,000 was invested for this period as well. So effectively what XIRR is doing is calculating these investments at a certain rate, 1 plus R raised to the power n. What is this n? The period for which the investment was applicable. So for the first 17 months approximately, you had 1 lakh rupees. For the next 12 months or 13 months, you had 1 lakh 10,000 invested. And for the last 7 months, you had taken out 1 lakh. So what was remaining was invested for that period, correct? And you calculate the return R based on that formula. And that is what is XIRR giving you, right? So the biggest benefit of the XIRR calculation is that XIRR effectively comes in handy when you have irregular interval cash flows. So whenever you have cash flows at irregular intervals, that's where XIRR becomes relevant. And this is more clear in terms of real life, because rarely in real life do people invest on predefined dates. I mean, they may do it, but in addition to doing investments on predefined dates, people almost always invest in between, right? Today the stock market has fallen, let's invest more. Today the stock market has gone up, let's sell something and take that money out, right? So IRR is going to be useful when cash flows are at regular intervals. And when we talk about mutual funds and we talk about insurances, we will realize probably IRR is not a bad way to look at. There are certain investments where the outflows are kind of fixed. You will put in 1,000 rupees like a recurring deposit, right? You will put in 1,000 rupees for 5 years, and then 1 year at the end of it, you will make, let's say, 8,000 rupees. Put all these numbers in the IRR formula and you will get what's the return on this investment. But if you're going to put it on dates in between those regular intervals, you're going to put it on irregular intervals, then you will need to use the formula XIRR, right? Fair and simple. Remember, both of these give you annualized returns. The value you have arrived at is effectively what is the annual return you would have made on this investment. That's an annualized value, right? That's not the total return you are making. In this case, for example, the total return was you made 1,30,000 on 1,10,000, right? So that's 20,000. 130 minus 110 divided by 110. So your actual return was to the tune of about 17% or something, not exactly 8%. 8% is the annualized return that you end up making on this, correct? And so obviously in this particular case, the timing of the cash flows becomes important. So timing of cash flows is important, and that has a far-reaching implication. At a later stage, we are going to discuss something around this timing of the cash flows, which will tell us how investment returns have to be computed and compared against various mechanisms, right? The next number that we reach to is real versus nominal return, right? When you look at real return, it takes the impact of inflation into account. So if FD gives you a return of 8.75% and inflation is 5%, then real return is 3.75%. In fact, we have seen this earlier when we looked at our example of 8% on FD and 10% inflation. We saw the real return was approximately minus 2%, right? So you take the actual return minus inflation, that gives you the real return. The actual return is nothing but the nominal return. So that 8% on the FD or 8.75 is the nominal return. So a thumb rule of quick calculation is nominal minus inflation gives you effectively approximately the real return. The actual calculation is 1 plus nominal return is equal to 1 plus inflation into 1 plus real return, right? You can derive this formula. We just did that when we did the 8% number. So effective return that you will end up getting if you want to calculate real return is 1 plus nominal return divided by 1 plus inflation minus 1. And that's why in our example, approximate number was, remember, 2% minus 2%, 8 minus 10. But if you remember, 10,000 did not become 9,800. It became 9,818, if you remember correctly in that example, right? So that effectively means that that the number calculation was happening with this formula, which was 1.08, 1 plus 8% divided by 1.10 minus 1, and that would give you the exact real return, right? Real return is important for us because a lot of the times inflation we have seen eats away into the value of the investments. So you would at least want some real return so that your purchasing power remains intact. That's the third measure of return that we have seen after total return, annualized return, and now we talk about real versus nominal return. Finally, taxes are an important part. An investor receives 8.75% of FD on rupees 100 and that is taxable. Assume that the tax rate is 20% on the return, only on the return. What is the post-tax return? So what is the return? It's 8.75. What is the marginal tax rate? 20%. So 20% on the return, which is 1.75 is the tax. Then after the tax, how do you arrive at the net return? 8.75 minus what you paid as tax gives you 7.0. So that's 7. So on your initial 100, you made a return of 7%, right? This is what is called as post-tax return or tax computed return. So post-tax return is pre-tax return into 1 minus the tax rate, correct? Pre-tax return, in this case 8.75%. We could have directly done this into 1 minus 20%. Whatever is the tax rate, 1 minus 20% into that, we could have done that. So that's the tax computed return that we are talking about in the context of our discussion of overall returns. Important metric because taxes are reality in the context of investment management, right? Let's take two quick cases. Mr. Y bought an equity share whose face value is rupees 10 for rupees 250 and earned a dividend on this effectively. So what was the dividend he earned? 50% dividend. Remember, dividend is on the face value, right? So in year 0, there was an outflow of 250. In year 1, there was an inflow of 50% on 10, that's 5. In year 2, there is a dividend of 60% in year 2, so that's 6. When we say 60%, remember dividend is always on the face value, right? And then in year 3, he sold it for 300. That's the set of cash flows we have looked at, correct? Can we calculate and solve this in Excel? If you note this carefully, this is cash flows happening at regular intervals. So we are looking at return. Whenever you are being asked on return, you can calculate both the total return and annual return. If you have to calculate the annual return, you will have to use IRR as a function here because these are happening at regular intervals. If it wasn't regular intervals, you would have used XIRR, right? So you could have used any of these two. Total return is straightforward. You're getting 300 plus 5 plus 6 minus the outflow, which was 250, divided by the outflow, which was 250. So that's 311 minus 250. That's 61 by 250. And that's going to be approximately close to 24% or 25%. Somewhere between 24 and 25% is the total return, remember, right? If you have to calculate the actual annualized return, let's go to the Excel file for that and let's type in the numbers. So you are paying 250, you are getting 5, you're getting 6, you're getting 300. We don't need the dates because we know they are at regular intervals. So we just calculate, put all these in, and we get an 8% return on this investment. We can actually see what is the exact number. That's 7.69% of return on this instrument that this particular gentleman, Mr. Y, has made, right? That's how you calculate the returns. Let's go ahead, look at the next case. We have one more case which we have, which is someone bought a house for 10 lakh rupees and you earned a rental income of 3,000 for 2 years. You then sold off the house for 12 lakh. What is the total return? Remember, now we are looking at the total return calculation. So outflow was 10 lakhs, right? Inflow at the end was 12 lakhs and rental inflow was 3,000 per month for 2 years. So 3,000 into 24, that's going to be 0.72 lakhs. 72,000 is what will come in. So 0.72 lakhs. So 12.72 lakhs minus 10 lakhs divided by 10 is going to be 2.72 lakhs divided by 10. That's 27.2% total return that you're looking at, right? That's the total return number that you're getting. And based on that, you can arrive at this calculation as to what the exact overall total return was. This would be a tricky case to calculate annualized return because the cash flows, in this case, you will have to use the XIRR formula, because if you were to calculate the annualized return, because cash flows are happening on a monthly basis. Remember, IRR assumes that cash flows happen on an yearly basis, right? So because cash flows might be happening at irregular intervals at the end of every month or 2 months or whatever, you are going to use the XIRR formula should you try to calculate the annualized return in this particular case, right? But that's how you basically solve questions around calculation of returns. As we come to the end of this section, a couple of questions for our understanding. An investor bought a house for 15 lakh. He earned a monthly rental income of rupees 5,000 for 1 year. He then sold off the house for 18 lakhs. What is the total return? Assuming that the tax rate is 20% on the entire income, when we say income, rental income, plus the gain he made on the house, on selling the house, what is the tax computed return at the end of the year, right? So you have to try and calculate these two. Question 2, explain the various different calculations of returns. Just write a brief line about each one of those.